Trump's anger didn't just make headlines, it echoed all the way across the Atlantic. UK's Trade Secretary Mark Carney slammed the brakes on a major US trade deal, leaving Trump fuming and firing shots on social media. The agreement was meant to be a big win, a handshake moment, but it turned into a standoff. Why did Carney back out the last minute? Was it pressure from inside the UK, or a deeper jab at Trump's return to the spotlight? With global deals hanging by a thread and Trump ready to strike back, this clash could trigger bigger waves than anyone expected.
The short answer, no, there was not a request from the United States, but it's a consequence of the US actions. As you know, the US tariffs on steel and aluminum are global tariffs. They're not targeted specifically at Canada, but they of course affect our steel industries and our workers.
For a very long time, Canada and the United States had one of the strongest partnerships in the world. Their border, known as the 49th parallel, wasn't a line of separation, but a symbol of friendship. It was the longest undefended border in the world, showing how much trust existed between the two countries. They shared many values like freedom, democracy, and economic growth. Every day, billions of dollars in goods moved between Canada and the US. This trade helped millions of people in both countries get jobs and grow their businesses. Agreements like NAFTA and the Auto Pact helped the strong connection continue. Canadian natural resources powered American industries, while US products filled shelves in Canadian homes. Because the rules were stable and clear, companies could make long-term plans. Factories, supply chains, and businesses in both countries depended on each other. This partnership made both nations stronger. When problems appeared globally, Canada and the US stood side by side and worked together.
Consequences of that effect, or prospective consequences, is that steel from other countries, from third countries, start to come into Canada if we don't protect our industry. So we're setting these quotas, it's a long word, tariff rate quotas, but a quota for the amount of steel that can come in from third countries.
Then things started to fall apart when the America First policy came into play. It changed the way the US saw its trading partners. Instead of seeing trade as a shared win, the US began to see it as a fight. This was a big shock for Canada. Suddenly, the agreements they trusted were called unfair. Canada, once seen as a friend, was now treated like a rival. The words coming from Washington, D.C. became cold and unfriendly. Tariffs, which were once used for enemies, now are being placed on Canada. Businesses on both sides of the border were left in confusion. Planning became hard. The US said Canadian goods were a security threat, which made no sense, especially because Canada and the US work together in defense programs like NORAD. This wasn't just a disagreement about money or goods. It felt like a betrayal. Canada had to wake up and realize that their strongest ally might not always be stable. The golden age of trust was ending.
That amount to stabilize the market, and to be clear, we will be reviewing the level of those tariff rate quotas as this progresses. It depends on what the United States does, first and foremost with Canada, whether we come to an agreement in the next 30 days, but also what they do with it.
Things got worse when the US added big tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. These materials are not just important items. They're what keep North America's factories running. The move caused major problems. Canadian producers lost money. US companies had to pay more for supplies. Prices for goods increased for people in both countries. Because of this sudden change, companies stopped investing. They didn't want to take risks. Even though both sides were hurt, trust suffered the most. The idea that the US would attack its closest partner made businesses scared. If one political decision could change everything overnight, how could they plan for the future? It became clear that in a closely linked economy like this one, everyone loses when cooperation breaks. Canada had a choice. It could fight back with harsh words and big reactions, but instead, it chose a smart and careful path. Canadian leaders used facts, not anger. They didn't only talk to the US government, they reached out to American governors, senators, and business owners. They explained how the tariffs were hurting American workers too. Jobs in US factories were at risk. Prices were going up. By showing that both countries were in pain, Canada got many American leaders to support change. When Canada decided to answer with its own tariffs, they were smart about it. They didn't target everything. They picked goods that would affect key US regions and politicians, so the message would be loud and clear. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting Canadian workers while keeping the door open for talks. This way of thinking showed Canada's values. Instead of reacting with anger, it stood strong with strategy. It was about showing leadership, even during hard times. Canada didn't just work alone, it built friendships with other countries too. Canada reminded the world about the value of free trade. It started making deals with Europe and Asia, like CETA and CPTPP. These new partnerships helped Canada reduce its risk and not rely on the US anymore. Because of this, Canada became a stronger player in the world market. Global companies started seeing Canada as a safe place to invest. Its economy became more stable and able to survive future problems. The trade fight became an opportunity. Canada used the pressure to grow, not collapse. It turned a crisis into strength. One of the most famous results of Canada's targeted response was what happened with American bourbon. Canada placed a tariff on US whiskey. The result? Sales of bourbon dropped by over 66% across the country and by 80% in places like Ontario. American whiskey makers lost money. Workers in Kentucky and Tennessee felt the impact. Suddenly, this wasn't just a trade fight. It was personal. American lawmakers started feeling the heat. Senators like Rand Paul spoke out, saying the trade war was hurting American industries. This example became a symbol. It showed how a decision meant to help can sometimes backfire. In a global economy, hurting one side often hurts the other too. Trade wars don't have winners, only pain for everybody. After all the noise and struggle, Canada came out stronger. The fight pushed Canada to build a more balanced economy. It made new friends, created new trade routes, and earned more respect around the world. The US, on the other hand, saw higher prices, broken supply chains, and a damaged image as a trade partner. While Canada stayed calm and careful, the US looked unstable and reactive. Canada's smart leadership and unity were noticed everywhere. It showed that strength doesn't always mean being loud. Sometimes it means staying calm and planning well. It's about building relationships, not breaking them. The big takeaway from all of this? Picking fights with close friends rarely ends well. Canada and the US had something special, built over many years. But when trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild. Canada's journey shows the power of good planning, smart decisions, and working with others. Even in tough times, respect and cooperation are the real keys to success. The world changes fast, but values like trust, unity, and patience still matter most. Canada didn't just survive a trade war, it rose above it. And that's something the whole world noticed. Thanks for watching. Hit like, tap subscribe, and keep your eyes open for the next shocker. See you soon!